Page 261, number 87, asks us to give us a function that is not one-to-one, and they ask us to restrict the domain so that h does have an inverse, and then to find it. So we can kind of cut this however we want. Most sensible way to cut it is probably right at the vertex. And maybe erase out this half of the graph. So that means if I restrict the domain, that basically makes the function h of x equals x plus 2 squared, comma, x is greater than or equal to negative 2. So the domain of the original function is negative 2 to infinity. The range is 0 to infinity. Therefore, the domain of the inverse, remember you switch the domain and range, so the domain of the inverse is the same as the range of the original. And the range of the inverse is the domain of the original. Okay? All right, so now let's actually find the inverse. This is x equals y plus 2 squared. Remember, to find the inverse, you switch the x and y and solve it for y. So the first step is to take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus or minus. And in this one, it's that plus or minus that is kind of the problem or the issue, I guess. So now subtract 2 from both sides, and we get y equals plus or minus the square root of 2, square root of x minus 2. So basically on this one, we need to figure out whether to keep the plus or the minus of this portion right here. If you graph y equals the square root of x minus 2 versus if you graph negative square root of x minus 2, this function is the square root function shifted 2 units down, which would be this, which does look like a reflection of this one. If you do the opposite, it's going to have the bottom portion to it, which is not the portion we want. So we want the portion that has this range value right here, negative 2 and infinity, which is this positive portion of the graph. So that tells me that for my inverse function, I want the positive portion of this piece right here, okay? This is the other type of question you got to be prepared for on the exam. Basically, when you get this plus or minus, you just have to decide whether you want the plus or the minus. You can use the range to determine it, or you could look at it graphically to determine it.